In association with Get a Tax Rebate, 1895 Sports, Mesa Vienna Aesthetics, CDX Security.
Okay, welcome to the Oddball Woody Show with another great guest this week. Probably the most interesting guy I know, definitely. Someone who I look up to, privileged to have him on. First of all, I just want to pass my condolences on to Danny Rugby, who sadly lost his life this weekend. I've just seen it over social media, and I want to pass my condolences on to his family and everybody at Lee Miners Rangers. Danny was a great guy, and it's such sad news that I've just seen that on social media. So, yeah, condolences to everybody who knew Danny, and stay strong. But on that, I want to bring in a good friend of mine. I've worked with him. I've played with him at England, a couple of appearances with him. Played against him all my career. One of the toughest competitors. One of the greats of Super League and of the Leeds Rhinos. It's Jamie Peter Jones-Buchanan.
Yes. He's got no song, his name's too long, Jamie Jones.
How we doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. It's the first time I've been introducing my full name. It's funny, just a silly daft story. Like when I signed for Leeds, and I talk about this when I go do my dinners and that. It was my hometown club. I fulfilled my boyhood dream playing for Leeds for 22 years. And I guess there's always a part of you, whilst you try to keep your humility, that hopes that one day you might have a song like Keith Senior or somebody else, do you know what I mean? And I remember it took, I'll get straight to the point, it took 7 years for me to get a song. Every time I scored a try, I'd walk back on side. It didn't happen often, by the way. But I'd be walking back on side like tumbleweed blowing through the stadium. And I thought, you know what? It's because I've not got my full name up back of my shirt, because in his infinite wisdom, the first kit man that I ever had, he put Jones on the home shirt and Buchanan on the away shirt. So like, I'd be like a different player running out when I was playing away. I'm like, who's this flipping Buchanan here? He's Winston Jones that played last week. And I always blamed him for the fact that I didn't have a song. But about 7 years in, I was getting back on side. I must have done something half decent. And they said, Jamie Jones. He's got no song, his name's too long. Jamie Jones. And it transpired because my name was too long. And it is long, mate. Longest name in Rugby League with Daniel Peter in the middle. I don't know why my mum and dad, my mum's called Jones, by the way. My dad's biological dad, Buchanan, who was the same dad as Austin Buchanan, Brooke Broughton, Jodie Broughton. He's got 11 kids, my dad. He's my biological dad, but my mum put them together as a double barrel name. So there's only me and my wife and 4 kids called Jones Buchanan in the whole world, I believe. So thanks for that, Woody.
See what I mean, mate? It's one of the most interesting guys. Just speaking about your name, though, you've got a story about it. But there's
everybody's switched off now. Though. Everybody's gone, who's this in here? No.
Do you know what, mate? The thing is, as well, there's some similarities, I feel, to our career. We both played a long time at one club, but I had exactly the same thing. Not that my name was too long. It just weren't good enough, but I didn't get a song for years. And me and Benny Westwood, we sort of made this little campaign to try and get a song for me, but it didn't work, mate. It didn't work. So, yeah, it's just one of them things. But at least you've got a viable excuse. But you did play. We'll touch on your career because you've just said you played at your hometown club. It's a boyhood dream. You signed for the Leeds Rhinos when you're 15 and played your full career there. Over 400 games. I'll just rhyme off what you've won, but you've won 7 Super League Grand Finals, 3 World Club Challenges, 3 League Leaders' Shields, and 1 Challenge Cup. That's a magnificent achievement. And not just the fact that you've won those trophies and you've played the international game, but I think to play at one club, I think it is special, isn't it, to do that?
Yeah, and I feel really privileged now, Woody, that I'm still able to coach there. I'm still working on a daily basis, and I made a video recently for one of our sponsors, A Day in the Life of Jamie Jones-Buchanan, and I started at R5 and I finished at night time, and it was a really good day actually. It was when we did our COVID tests, it was when we did our training, did some extra bits of work. And during that day, I went to Headingley twice, and both times, I didn't realise at the time, But when I look back to edit the video, both times I said, this is home, this is my home. And it does feel like that. That's where a lot of my family and friends are. And I've been there since I was 15. So you imagine that place has brought me up. Then I was a child when I first went and signed for Leeds. Now I'm nearly 40 years old. I'm 39 years old. So, the culture there, the people, the environment has made me into the person that I am today. And listen, just beyond Leeds, because I know there'll be people who listen to this who aren't Leeds fans and just love the game of rugby league. And I love them too. And we'll probably talk about Rugby AM. But I am grateful. There's a great debt of gratitude to what the game of rugby league's given to me, mate. When I look back at everything, it's probably, apart from my family and my wife, most of who and what I am today, even as a Christian in my faith, has come through rugby league. So, yeah, mate, it was a boyhood dream. And it's not wasted on me how fortunate that I've been, not just to play there, but also play with a fantastic generation that seemingly came through at the same time.
Yeah, it is. I feel exactly the same about the game. It's, I look back on my life where I was as a 15, 16-year-old kid, and then you get involved in rugby. And, you're playing a sport that you love, but there's so much to it. The mentality that you get, the experiences that it gives you, it opens up new avenues for you. I've learned so much about, what is out there, really, because I was a young kid at 15, 16, probably thought I knew everything and I'd seen everything, and then you get involved in rugby and you're meeting so many different personalities, cultures, you go to different parts of the world, and it's just an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I don't know. Listen, I live in a big city. Leeds is a big city, so it's not like there's a great deal of diversity. But it's funny listening to you, Woody, and obviously getting to know you over years. Lads like Brad Dwyer and Don Crosby and some of the lads who've been in and around that Wigan area, they always refer to it as being a bit of a bubble. When you go to Wigan from an outsider coming in, you certainly get the essence of rugby league being one of the most important things there. And everybody knows everybody, whether it be St Pat's, St Jude's, in Shrewsbury, everybody seems to know each other. And when you get some of them Wigan lads come out, they talk about it being very intense, almost like, I don't know, you tell me, you're from that background, but as if there's almost a level of expectation. And when I went to St John Fisher to meet Dave Marlin, when I saw that wall, and I've told you about it before, I've seen the Catholic school at the bottom there, then the high school and DW Stadium, you think, wow, it's like almost bred into your blood and your veins, it's flowing through your veins to be rugby league. But listen, great Northern town, and as big as a rival Wigan have been, you've got to take my hat off to what they've done for game of rugby league, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right though. There's a level of expectation as a young kid. I think, rugby's sort of, especially rugby league, it is a bit of a get out for a lot of kids. And, we have top, I spoke to you about the wrestling. Wrestling is quite renowned in Wigan. You've got your rugby league. I mean, for a town to have a Premiership football team and a Super League team in such a small town, I think it's a massive achievement. And we are very sport orientated in this, and it probably is very alien for you, because it's same for me. When I go to Leeds, it's like, wow, it's like London to me. Right, it's massive. It's unbelievable, and it's a lot more diverse than Wigan as well. It's completely different cultures, but it's, again, it's going back to the rugby league and meeting the different characters. I've learned so much about people. Just going back to when you first signed, I've spoke to you briefly about this before, but one thing that I really admire you for, Jonesy, is when I had my testimonial at Warrington, someone passed me a testimonial brochure and said, read this, it's a great brochure. And I read a bit of your story. And what I really admired about you is the fact that you didn't have it all your own way as a young kid. You suffered with some injuries and you had to battle and battle and battle to gain your... I think it was an hip injury that you had when you was a young kid, and you had to battle to get into that first team and achieve your dream. So it didn't come easy. That was the thing that I thought, this guy that was over 10 years ago now, but this guy's got something, because I hated Leeds players. You had that arrogance about you, didn't you? Until we meet you, we hate every single Leeds player. Ryan Bailey, I was so disappointed that I liked Ryan Bailey when I first met him. But yeah, you tell us about that, about your early career.
Yeah, Bales was a real pantomime bad guy. One even home fans used to boo him when he used to come out. But no, listen, it's a funny one that, because we had obviously a lot of respect and reverence for Wigan as well. I remember when Andy Farrell's brothers, Phil and Chris, and Isherwood, we used to play against Wigan, and they were outstanding. And I remember we used to get off at bus and stick the keys in the floor and think, what are they doing? They know what they're doing. But I think there's a big town, big city team or from that. I don't know. I think it was a bit of a smoke screen. It pretended a little bit, but yeah. Listen, going back to adversity, I've got to do a bit of a talk on Tuesday actually to a lot of college kids that have just graduated from a course, and they want me to talk a little bit about my career, and the crux of it, the foundation, is always based around resilience and perseverance. And I think that only comes, or certainly is helped, by going through the mill, like going through a fair amount of adversity. And I'm not talking about the type that breaks some people. You know, some people have had it way tougher than me, but I always refer back to the groin injury that I had when I was a young kid come through. I didn't have a great deal of talent, but I was an industrious player. I worked really hard, and I'd concentrate on my fitness because that was always my strength. I wasn't the most talented or most skillful, but I'd go that extra mile, and I'd go and run on that piece of grass that nobody else had run on. Because I always tell the young kids at school, listen, we'll grow up and people will tell you only get out of life what you put in. But that's subjective, it's relevant. You know, I'm not going to get the same out of life as Kevin Sinfield if I put in the same amount as Kevin Sinfield, because Kevin Sinfield's a different character. There's some things that he doesn't need to do as much as me to be better. I've got to do twice as much as Kev. You know, in a few weeks' time, months' time, he's running a marathon. And I know that I'm going to have to put a lot more preparation in if I'm going to join him on one of the days than what he would, because he's an immaculate character. So life's really relative. And going back to that injury, it was at Orrell, actually. We played a reserve grade game at Orrell, and I broke my jaw. I got a whack off one at Wigan forwards. It was an undisplaced fracture. And I'd had a bit of ice and anti-inflammatories. And I think while I'd been on painkillers, I'd been doing some squats a few days later, and it was an accumulation of me being a 15, 16-year-old kid wanting to accelerate and get as far as I could, as early as I could. So I remember being sort of 16 years old, squatting 150, 200 kilograms, and probably looking back, one big enough. I was always really strong and probably did too much, worried more about just beating next guy who were Gareth Carvel at the time than just doing what was right for me. And that accumulated into me pulling my long adductor off my groin, and it completely tore off. And I'll never forget, the weekend after we played this Thursday night at Orrell, I'd gone to a caravan with my girlfriend, who's my wife now, and throughout the day, my groin just seized up to a point where at night I couldn't move. I was in agony, like the worst pain I've ever had, even since then. And to cut a long story short, when I went to hospital, they said my SI joint, the sacroiliac joint, had separated from my hip, and my adductors had torn off, and they only see that injury in motorbike accidents. Now, whether it was something that was going to happen and I've just pushed it over the line doing these really heavy squats while I've been on these painkillers because of jaw, I don't know. Never really got to the bottom of it, and it's irrelevant. The point is that I went through the best part of a 2-year process to get back right. And I had to watch lads like Danny Maguire, Rob Burrow, Kev Sinfield go, boom, Danny Ward, Gaz Carvel, all come through first team. And then lads come from bottom as well and pass me, and Chev Walker and Mark Calderwood and Ryan Bailey, and be part of this big nucleus that went on in a big part to be known as this sort of golden generation, or certainly earlier stages. And I just got left behind. And that was difficult at the time. You know, you're waking up on a morning and your boyhood dream might be failing and finishing before it's even started. And I'd cry my eyes out. But listen, at the time, I had Dean Bell, who was our coach. And Dean Bell, if you've ever met Dean, he's all about mental toughness and perseverance. So he drove a lot into me. And being at Leeds, mate, I had all the care and support that I ever needed. And by God's grace, I managed to get through it. And I always feel that was a big part of the refining process. And I'll just leave you this metaphor really quickly. You know, when I've got my first grand final medals ring on now, and I'm not wearing it because you've asked me to come on podcast. I don't know if I'll go in focus. I'm wearing it because when I retired, I put it on for this promo, and I thought, do you know what? Now that I'm retired, I'm going to leave it on. Now we give each other gold and silver whenever we win trophies, gold, silver, bronze at the Olympics, right? And you think about gold as a metal, it's you might have heard me say this before, it's one of the most unentropic and valuable metals on earth. It's rare, but even gold has to mine that out floor. It has to be put in a furnace and heated up to really high pressure. And I always talk to the kids and tell them that this pressure, when we're under it, it's horrendous. Well, when we're in an environment that can melt us, it's horrible, and there's no words that can make it feel any better. But actually, if we can persevere through it and get all the dross, right, the indisciplines, and stick with it, what comes out at the other end is more refined. And I always use that picture, and gold is a really valuable metal. It doesn't rust, or it's one of the least rusting metals on the planet. It's got great electroconductive properties, and it's actually got a lot of utility. And we use it symbolically as a reward for the end of a persevering journey where you've been successful. And that's how I always think about life when we go through adversity. It's like being refined like a precious metal.
Yeah, interesting that. I mean, there's a few things that I picked up on there. I think a big one for me is the having patience as a young kid is quite difficult. You know, we want everything tomorrow, don't we? We're not willing to sort of wait, and we want to take that first team opportunity. Even at 16, 17 years of age, we think we're ready for first team. You know, we're full of hormones, and you know we want to take on the world. Having a bit of patience for a youngster is massive. You know, and another thing that I picked up on there, and it's typical, I always remember my uni teacher, when I went to university, a great teacher called Colin Robertson. And he used to always say, you do the typical rugby league thing, you put yourself down, you don't big yourself up. You always say, you know, you say it quite a lot, Jonesy, I wasn't that talented, but you was talented. You know, and that work ethic and that attitude and that behaviour that you possess is a talent. Not a lot of rugby players have that. Do you know what I mean? Not a lot of players have it. And if I'm coaching, it's a quality that I want to see in players. That's why you played, I think, for so long, you know, as you did, because that for me, it is a talent. It's not just the behaviour. You know, we've got to have this energy about us and this never say die attitude, and you know, the resilience to overcome it. I love stuff like that because I just think there's too often people they've not got the patience and they haven't got the resilience to just overcome the diversity, you know, the adversity that they're going through at the time.
Yeah, mate, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right to pick up on that. And I guess that's just the humble side trying to shine through and they're grounded. But you're right. When you're coaching, you try and coach fundamental skills into young people in particular. And you have to remind the older senior blokes as well. So some of the fundamentals like getting off at deck and getting to marker, getting back on side, working when you're tired, getting a bit of line speed, making sure you're in the line with a kick chase. You could argue that they're the parts of the game that don't require any talent. But you're absolutely right. To do that consistently, repetitively, for not just maybe 1 or 2 years, but for 10 or maybe even 20, that is a talent in itself. You're right. And you come across a lot of these people, don't you? Say, I could have been a professional, this, that, or other, but I liked my beer too much, or I liked this too much. Well, you could never have been a professional because you just didn't have what it took. You're absolutely right. And I think some books out there, Danny Medeiros, I think his book is called Talent's Not Enough. And actually, it's part of science as well. I mean, I read years ago about delayed gratification. And if you Google it later on, they did an experiment back in the 70s. You might have heard of it, Paul. And basically, they got a lot of young kids at about 4 or 5 years old, and they put them in a room. And it's called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. So they put them in a room, and they give these kids a marshmallow, right? Bearing in mind in the 70s, they probably didn't have many good sweets back then. But they say to a young kid, right, if you can wait 20 minutes, when I come back in this room, if that marshmallow's there, you can have a second one. But if you want, you can eat it whenever you want, but you don't get a second one if I come back in and it's gone after 20 minutes. And they measured it, and some kids could do it, and some kids couldn't. Now, Haribo actually ripped that off in an advert. You might have seen it in the last 5 or 6 years. But what they found when they followed these children is that the ones who became more successful in sport or academia or business or whatever it was were the ones that had the ability to wait that 20 minutes. And, you know, listen, I've got 4 boys, and I see a little bit of that now. When Christmas comes around and you get the advent calendar, don't you? It's got all chocolates in it run up to Christmas. And you have the last one, the big one, on Christmas Eve. Now, there's some kids that can just have one a day, and they're really disciplined, just have me 1 chocolate a day before I go to school or whatever. But then there's them other kids who want to come back at night and think, you know what, I fancy another chocolate. And you have a look, and in the first week, they've all gone. You know, and you can tell there a little bit, and it's not an exact science, which ones are going to be the ones to have that delayed gratification. And I know there's probably 2 out of my 4. And you see that now that they're getting to teenagers, you see where it really does apply. So you're absolutely right. It is an intrinsic part of some of us. I don't know whether it's something you can train, Paul, or get better at, but it's certainly a scientific variable, if you like.
Well, do you know what? You just must have been reading my mind there, because I was just going to say, like, going back to what rugby give me, I think it gives me an element of that I think you've got to have a sort of, I don't want to sound like I'm bigging myself up here, but I think you've got to have a level of intelligence to see that sometimes if you work and you wait and you be patient, that things will generally come to you, you know, and I suffered a lot of injuries myself through my career, you know, 5 shoulder operations, back operation, knee, hernia, everything. And I think it worked out to about 15 operations I had during my 17-year career at Warrington.
Wow.
But I had to learn to be patient, and just to, you know, when the surgeon said 10 weeks that I wouldn't play rugby, then I waited the 10 weeks, and I had to have the patience and start from the rock bottom. You know, so I think there's a level of that we can sort of develop, but I think there comes a bit of an intelligence from the individual as well to sort of learn things as we go on.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know that you listen to some of that Jordan Peterson stuff, don't you? And he talks a lot about, and I'm paraphrasing here, so you might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but when he uses the archetypes of heaven and hell. So when you persevere, there's a level of understanding that at the end of that perseverance, there could be a really big reward, or a reward that you're really keen to have, that you really want. And as long as that reward is bigger than the hell of not achieving it, then you will get there. Now, that's really interesting because, you know, through being 15 years old to 38 when I retired, being as good as I could be, with the variables that I could control. I couldn't control getting old in the end, so I slowed down and I was nowhere near as good at the back end, and I really struggled. That was out of my control. It didn't matter how disciplined or committed I was. I was getting old. Nobody can fight entropy. But since I've retired, Woody, there are some things that I used to do really easily as far as discipline goes that I struggle to do now. So, for example, like this spot I'm in now, I manufactured it out of a gym. So when our gym got flooded in 2015, Boxing Day, I went down and I salvaged a lot of stuff that they threw in skip. And I had this idea that when I retired, I'd be the same type of guy. I'd be doing 10 300s on row. I'd be doing whatever on what bike, 500s, and then I'd try and get a body where I'd be doing loads of weights. And what's really interesting is now that I've retired, I've got absolutely no motivation for that style of training. And what I've actually done is I've started running. I'm doing maybe 25, 30 miles a week, and I want to increase it. And that is the last thing in the world that I would ever have expected myself to start doing. And the motivation primarily was, 1, to spend more time with my wife because I run with her, and 2, because Kev Sinfield is doing a lot of running now for himself and for charity, and 3, that's where I see the competition. So when I'm in here on my own lifting weights, I could do that as a player because I knew that I'd go out and it'd show itself either in the gym with other lads or on the field when I'm competing. But now that I've got no gym to train with lads and no field to compete on, it almost becomes obsolete. There's no heaven at the end of that road. So the heaven for me is A, spending time with my wife, and B, competing with people like Kev Sinfield. So it's really important that whatever it is you want to achieve in life, you've got to have a level of desire to want to do it.
I think, yeah, completely agree. I mean, circumstances change, and a friend of mine says nothing's forever. Our mindset, and we are, we have, as life goes on, goals change, desires can change, and we just sort of. I'm the same. I found myself doing things completely different than what I thought. When you, like you say, you play rugby and you sort of sit there and you go, do you know what? When I retire, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And it just doesn't pan out that way because you just don't have the level of motivation because there's nothing at the end of it. You've got to have that responsibility and level of dedication. I think as well with rugby players as well, we sort of we're like all or nothing in some respects, aren't we, with our training? If there's nothing at the end of it, then we're not just simply just not doing it. We can't potter around, can we?
No, definitely not. And I think you're right. The level of competition for me is something that stood out to me. I did a training session last week, a controlled and distanced one, by the way, with Josh Warrington, who's a boxing, obviously, world champion at his weight. And it was interesting listening to his journey. I spoke to him a fair bit, and what's always stood out for me is the level of preparation that he throws into everything that he does. Now, bearing in mind, being a boxer, I imagine, can be quite lonely because you're in that ring and you'll know what it. If you've played 400 games, there's a level at which there'll be a percentage of games there where I won't say you're a passenger, but by good grace of your teammates, you manage to get through it. And look, you can't be 100% your best every week. But as a boxer, when you get that ring, that's all you can be. You can't rely on anybody else. You're all by yourself, and there's an accountability there. And when I see him training, he'll train and he'll compete against himself. And I think the correct wording for it is task motivation, when you want to beat yourself and better your last time. And there's a level of that in all of us, I imagine. But for me, what I've come to realise and it's quite powerful, that a lot of my motivation came around beating other people and winning. It came around winning. And so today, I was looking on YouTube, I'm just flicking through YouTube, and on my line, Niall Wilson came up. Niall Wilson's an athlete from Leeds, Olympic medalist, and really well known worldwide. And he has this YouTube channel. It's got about 1.4 million followers. It's unreal. And what he does is he brings other people in to compete against him. So he'll go gymnastics versus CrossFit or gymnastics versus rugby. And he'll do these little exercises. And you see this comparison. And I've seen this CrossFit guy, and he was absolutely ripped. Like, he's, as an alpha male, he's exactly what you'd like to look like. And even if, right, I thought to myself, that's what I want to achieve. There's no way in a million years, because I'm 40 years old and my body doesn't produce the same hormones anymore, that I could ever get to that level. I can only be as good as I can be as a 40-year-old Jamie Jones-Buchanan, which revolves around task motivation. I can't beat the next 20-year-old kid anymore. Whereas the last 15, 20 years, I have been able to do that, or at least try and compete. And that is what I found pretty difficult to manage. And I'm finding a lot about what my motivations were as a youngster. So yeah, that's been interesting and challenging for me.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I had a lot of the similar things. It was, beating somebody else and having that fear of somebody else beating me in testing day. Who am I partnered up with? Oh, I've got to beat him at fitness challenge. Got to beat him at bench press. I can't let him take my position. So when you're wrestling, you want to dominate him. And it's all about competing and beating that person in front of you. It's interesting you talk about this, because since I've come away from rugby, I am listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson. And something that I was listening to a couple of weeks ago, actually, where he was saying, really, we can only compete with ourselves because we only have our own experiences, and to compare ourselves and compete with other people, their situation and experiences are so different from ours. So if we can just compete with ourselves, use our own experiences and be better than we was yesterday, then ultimately we won't go far wrong. And I think that's pretty true and relevant, no matter what sport or just in life in general.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a subjective truth in that, isn't there? And another part that formed a lot of what I speak about when I go to businesses or schools is something that I learned in 2014. So you reeled off there a lot of awards that I've been fortunate to achieve as part of a really good Leeds Rhinos generation. But the Challenge Cup was the most elusive one for us. So Leeds won it just as we were coming through in '99. Then it was 2014 before we won it again. It was a full 15 years. Bearing in mind we'd won 6 grand finals at that point. So it wasn't like we were a bad team either. But for whatever reason, whenever we went to Wembley, whether it be against Warrington or Wigan, we were first team to lose 3 in a row in 2010, 11, 12. And it was really funny. We won it in 2014. Now, all our prior experience talking about there was winning grand finals. Now, what's interesting about the grand finals is it's the last game of the year. So that's it. End of the year. You win your grand final, down your tools, you have a big party to celebrate, pat each other on back, high five, well done guys, enjoy your season, let's go again. That's put behind us. Challenge Cup, there's still at the middle of the season, or later on, but it's still got some season to play. And when we won it in 2014 against Cass, we lost every single game after that. And just went like that and crashed. And the big line that came from that in my thinking was, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose on a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon. What's important is how you get out of bed the next day and use either experience. And he used the Rudyard Kipling poem, Triumph and Disaster, treat those two imposters just the same. And it is, mate, it's a momentary piece of feedback whether you win or lose. Just tells you where you are at that particular moment. But again, I go back to this idea of the things that I can't control. And as I've got older, I don't waste time and energy on the things that I can't control. And the big thing that I can't control is the fact that tomorrow morning, Woody, and I will work this way around, but tomorrow morning, I can't be better physically than I was yesterday because I've reached an arc at which I'm approaching 40. I've gone past my peak of physical ability and I'm only going to deteriorate now until the day I die. And that's really negative, that, isn't it? But that's the bit that mortality is really it sort of starts to sink in. Now, we'll talk about how I get over that, and my faith is at the centre of it. But so emotionally, in my heart and mind, I'm fine. Don't know what I mean? This is sounding pretty depressive, I know. But what I'm saying is my secular life, if you like, has always revolved primarily around physical well-being and fitness. And that physical well-being and fitness can only deteriorate through no control on my own. So they're the things that I've got to manage. But as I'm sure we'll talk about soon, I have got the most important coping mechanism to deal with that.
Yeah, definitely. We will touch on it. Your Christianity, and you use the word coping mechanism there. I think going back to just what you're saying there, I think there's physical elements that we can't control. Tends to be like people, places, things, and nature. We just can't control it. We speak about it in rugby all the time. Control the controllables. Generally, we're talking about a referee when he gives a bad decision. He's given knock on or he's given eye tackle, and your coach always says control the controllables. Yeah. And again, you translate that into general life. People, places, things, nature. Can't control these things. We've just got to we're dealt in hand, and we've just got to deal with it. And we've just got to control the things that we can. And 99 times out of 100, it's just myself, and how I respond to that situation. But it's going back to just what you're saying there. I think for me, I just try to be the best version of I can be today. Do you know what I mean? I think not worrying about where I was yesterday, not worrying about where I am tomorrow, where I'm at today, as a person. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And I asked John Wilkin this question. So I talked to him, I interviewed him a few weeks ago. And listen, they're only talking about competing. So play Warrington, compete against you. You're my age, Benny Westwood, play St Helens, the John Wilkin. You go to Wigan, be Liam Farrell. There's all Canterbury Bulldogs. It'd be Sonny Bill. Somebody who's like this much better. And you think, right, we're going to throw a caution at Windy and just get off the line and just shut my eyes and hope for best, see what happens. But we always get these bits of feedback. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So Monday morning, you get back into work, you make a decision. What can I improve on here? You spend all week then trying to be a little bit better. Now, what questions I asked John were like, how do you deal with not being able to have that feedback anymore? Because I obviously am accountable for my job and I've got a job role and I get appraisals, but not on a weekly basis like I did when I was playing. And I really struggled to not get that feedback anymore, because you think, right, Monday morning, how am I gonna go out and be better than I was yesterday? Bearing in mind it's my own. I'm talking to young people when I'm saying this. So how does that change when you're talking to older people? So I can try and be the best version of myself, but the feedback that I keep getting, right, I don't keep getting, that's not the right phrase. I think a lot of it might be because I'm in a bit of a new role as well. But if I was to just pull my rower down, I've got a rower here, and try and do 10 300s, I might just scrape through it. But there's this level of understanding. Well, a couple of years ago, I smashed through it. And I keep going on about the physical here. So I suppose like the mental, when you come out of playing a game like rugby league, and these are all questions that I'm asking myself, you spent your whole time almost being institutionalised, being told where to go, where to be, what to wear, what you have to do, and what it should sort of look like. And when you finish that, bearing in mind I've been there since I was a child, and you come out, all that sort of changes. So then how do you adjudicate what is of any quality? And Andy Ireland, who works for us at Rugby, I'm always on at him. Oh, I don't quite like this. This is shot in wrong frame rate. The colours look rubbish on what's going on. What camera are you shooting it with? And I'm always on to them. And they kept saying, I think because you've spent like 20 years operating, trying to be the best version, I'm really picky about everything. You have an expectation in your mind. And if it's anywhere below that, it's like, ah. So I said to John Wilkin, how do you do with that? And he sort of said, look, all the way through my life, I've been my biggest, harshest critic. So now it's only his own sort of subjective opinion that he worries about, which I suppose is where I've probably got to get to. It's hard, Woody, it's a measuring stick. What is good? It's a scale, isn't it? Is good what you think, or is it a sliding scale based on what everybody else is doing?
At Get a Tax Rebate, we make it easy for you or your business to claim back thousands of pounds in tax. Most people, like Jane and Philip, don't realise that they are owed money from HMRC, so they never claim. All you need to do is fill out a simple form on our website and we'll do the rest. It's that simple. We've also helped business owners claim back millions of pounds in research and development R&D tax credits. So if you're working in a business or own one, contact us today to see if we can help you claim back tax and improve your cash flow. Get a Tax Rebate, your tax refund concierge.
(1895) Sports and State of Mind, the ultimate lineup.
Macy Vienna Aesthetics, based in Wigan. For all your wrinkle treatments, dermal fillers, lip enhancement, energy boost injections, immune boost injections, please visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Macy Vienna Aesthetics.
CDX Security, proudly supporting Rugby League.
It's an interesting sort of question. Sorry, mate.
No, it's interesting because going back to what I was saying, where everybody's got different experiences, everybody's had a different upbringing. I think we're sometimes, and I speak to rugby players who have retired, they've played the game and they've been involved in it for a long time, and they come away from it and they put their expectations on other people, and I can sort of do it myself, where I think do you know what? I think this should be a certain level. I want it a high level. But that person that's doing that task doesn't have the same expectation as me. It's lower. And I get so frustrated with it. But it's sometimes we do have to accept. And, I blow up, you see, and I get quite angry with people and I get frustrated and it shows in. But I suppose, again, going back to rugby, I can do that on a rugby pitch. You can be, a little bit animated and frustrated on a field and it's sort of accepted. When you go into the real world, working environment, I sort of do have to tone it down a little bit and just realise that, these people haven't been involved in professional sport for 17 years. These guys are just used to sometimes coming into work, getting through the day job and then going home and doing that. And it is such a difficult thing to do, because do I lower my standards or do I try and bring everybody's standards up, or do I meet in the middle? What is the right answer in that?
You've just semantically thrown up a few thoughts in my mind there, mate, and you're absolutely right. And that is another challenge that I've faced going out into the world away from professional sport, and that level of expectation. And even culturally, you'll know that rugby league even internally is not what it was 20 years ago, right? Completely different. I'll give you one analogy. I always tell the story. I've got a shirt there. I'm going to take the camera out and show you it. So on my wall, I don't know if you can see it. See that shirt there, Superman on it?
Yeah.
So we played Wigan in that shirt in 2013. Wigan won comp in that year, and they were very good. But we played them, and it was like a Man of Steel thing. I think Sam Tompkins were doing a lot of interviews with the guy who played Superman. And they brought out like a bit of a special shirt for that round, and we weren't doing that much that year. We didn't win anything, and I remember Jamie Peacock. That night we wore that shirt. His dad was sadly in a really bad way. He was dying, and he's the hospital. And he won't mind. I've talked about this publicly before, and he won't mind me sharing it. But his dad was dying, and he had a choice. He could either go play with us at Wigan at DW Stadium in a normal league round game. We're still fighting for playoffs. Or he could go with his dad, be with his dad in last hours of his life. And he decided to go play because I don't know whether he thought that's what his dad had wanted to do or what. And it's none of my business, and he wouldn't have been judged either way. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. Go back to this idea of what is right or wrong. But the level of commitment you sort of take from that, you go, wow. And we went there that day and we won. And it was one of those games, mate, you'll have played in these where you can't do anything wrong. We were just in the floor. And we absolutely mashed them. After that, we all went away and we were hopeless. But that particular night, it was unbelievable. And JP in particular was something special. So when you think to yourself, right, let's have a look back at why we were successful. Let's have a look at our professionalism, our sacrifice, our level of commitment, right? They're the sort of standards that you put to it. So then 5-6 years later, when that generation retires and the new kids come in, you might have a young kid who'll come up and go, oh, coach, do you reckon I can have next weekend off? I don't think I'm going to be able to play against Wigan because my sister's getting married in Spain. Can I go to Spain instead? And you're like, because of the level that you operate at, you're like, is he having a laugh? But then when you take yourself out of it and think, is a wedding in Spain a legitimate reason to miss a game? Yeah, probably is. It's not a bad reason. I think weddings are really special. In fact, I think weddings at most important institutions in life, it's the thing that makes me the happiest is my wife and my marriage to my wife. So yeah, it's really important. And then there's a level of me going, come on, Jamie, come on. No, they're both unique cases, and there is no right and wrong. And I guess when you sort of pedal to metal like this, trying your best to be as good as you can be for 20 years, and you have these talismanic, whatever the word is, people like Jamie Peacock and Kev Sinfield and Danny Maguire, we're all seeing how tough and brave Rob Burrow's been this year and how much we all love him. And he talks a lot about how is all right, and rugby league has given him this foundation of resilience, and it's life-changing stuff, would it? And you have this level of expectation, and it's difficult to let that go. It's difficult to wind that back, mate, for what comes through, and it just has a different way of seeing things.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think to get on in life, I think, you know, we're so privileged to do what we do, but then I think in rugby league, you know, when we come away from it and we're sort of, you know, working in this real world, I keep calling it, but the level of expectations is generally not high. You know, it is in rugby league. To succeed at anything in sport, no matter what you do, sport-wise, engineer-wise, you're a bank manager, whatever, it takes a level of sacrifice and dedication. But not everybody has that. And, you know, I used to get frustrated sometimes. So going back to when I ruptured my testicle in the grand final and I played on for 25 minutes, you know, and then you'd get a young lad coming in the physio room saying, I don't think I can play this week, I've got a dead leg. And you'd be like, fucking you'd be chewing the pillar in there going, what is going on? I sacrificed my fucking left bollock to play in a game. And you're thinking about not playing because you've got a dead leg. Yeah. Now, you know, again, just different perceptions of what is acceptable to different people. And I think we have to use a quotation by Bruce Lee, be water, you know. Yes. You've just got to flow. You've just got to, you know, sort of evolve as life goes on, really, and sort of the people that you're around. And I think, you know, the culture that you're in, sometimes, we can try to bring it up, but there's a level of balance that we need to bring to that, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting that Johnny Wilkinson did a podcast. You'll know Damien Hughes. You've done some bits with him.
Yeah. I think Damien Hughes is great. I'm trying to get him on the podcast with Spoke, so hopefully get him on soon.
Well, ask him about Johnny Wilkinson, because to me it was bizarre. Having listened to, well, not listen, I don't know the guy, but having seen what he's achieved and what he must have gone through to sort of play at the level he did, and to listen to him speak now, it's very hard to reconcile a lot of what he's saying, and a lot of it is very sort of new age about being in the moment. And I'm there, I'm listening, but I guess I'm that indoctrinated with what is accountability. I find it really hard, mate. And I'm a dad. I'm a dad, so I've got 4 boys who are reaching sort of early teenage years. They're going to be very impressionable, turning into men, going to have their own ideas of what they want out of life. And I need to be there as a dad to support them and help them. Not to tell them what to do or where to go, but just be there to support them. You know, I'm still an husband, and I find it very hard to reconcile with this idea that life's not always going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult. You know, and again, we haven't talked about my faith, but when you read a book like the Bible, 66 books and letters over thousands of years with different authors, all inspired by God, who, if you believe, is our creator. You know what I mean? When you look at the Bible, the first 4 words, in the beginning, God created. He's a creator. He's an artist. He creates people, and that's intrinsic in all of us. We're all got something unique and individual that we can give to the rest of the world, hopefully, selflessly. But there's no hiding from the fact that journey is always going to be. I mean, you listen to Carl Jung, read any of the books, Nietzsche, Jordan Peterson. Life, whether you think it's an archetype or not, it is a living struggle. It is difficult, and I find it hard to reconcile with this sometimes. With and I might be wrong. I'm open to suggestions that there's ever a way, a valuable way, an important way of finding a real consistent solution to it.
Yeah, again, going back to Jordan Peterson, you know, to use you know, not word for word, but he said, you know, that he said on something I was listening to, you know, the abyss is coming. It is coming at some point during life. You'll either get ill, someone will get ill, you'll be facing redundancy, you'll get injuries, no matter what it is. The abyss is coming, and we need something that is going to get us through that period, because, you know, he talks about life being wretched, you know, and he uses that word, and it can be at times. You know, life, people struggle in life, and we need, you know, some coping mechanisms to get through it. And, you know, we'll touch on your Christianity here, because I believe faith is a big part of his. What's missing in society? I'm not saying that you have to be a Christian, you have to be a Muslim or a Sikh or whatever. I'm not saying you need to have the religion in your life, but I think faith is such an important part of what's missing from community these days. And, you know, just to use what Carl Jung says, you know, he says the highest ideal someone holds, consciously or unconsciously, that's their God. You know, so he basically wasn't say, he was saying that, you know, you don't need to believe in a God that's, you know, that's out there religiously, but you do need to believe in something. So tell us what took you to Christianity, Jones, and what was it?
Well, it's an interesting one there, because even from a moral point of view, I think they'd find it'd be hard. Put religion to one side, it'd be hard pressed to find a human that would disagree with the comment that you've got to find truth. So whatever's true, you've got to, you know, truth. God has got to be truth, hasn't it? It's got to be truth. That is one constant. Now, you're right. With certainly all the religions in the world, there's certainly three mainstream monotheistic religions in Islam, Christianity and Judaism. And they're all, I'll have a lot of Christians throwing tomatoes at me if I said that they were all similar, because they're not, but they're all rooted in a similar timeline and history. Very different beliefs about that history. But my faith came about in a search for that truth, would it? So I, even from being a 3-4 year old, as far back as I can remember, I had absolutely no doubt, and I still absolutely no doubt, the fact that I am conscious. And when I say conscious, aware of the fact that I am aware. And I hear that phrase come from all kinds of pillars and corners of the planet. But the fact that me and you are having a conversation and I'm aware of it tells me that there has got to be a bigger, omnipotent, controlling, all-powerful force out there in the universe, whatever the universe is, multiverse, the conceivable physical entity and beyond that, inconceivable, metaphysical. Now, I guess there is a truth to that, underlying truth. People sometimes say, well, that's your truth, my truth is this. Well, no, that's perception. I'd argue that that's perception. Truth, there isn't an objective truth. So what is that? And when Ali Lautiti came over from New Zealand in 2004, year we won our first grand final, I didn't know who he was, and I just thought that he was another back rower coming to take my place and make it even harder for me to get a regular spot. And it was horrendous. And again, I was just an industrious, hard-working kid. But what was different about Ali was, I mean, everybody who watches any sort of Super League will remember how good he was as a player. But he was even 10 times better as a human being. He's a lovely fella. Now, I'm not saying that faith makes you a good person. Everybody's got different opinions, and that's absolutely fine. Diversity is really important. That's why God made us different. But I knew that Ali was a Christian because of the way he acted. He was a shining light. He was a shining light in I won't say a dark room. We had some real quality environments, but just in those cantankerous moments where rugby players and young men want to be young men, with all the trappings of that and the wrong desires that culture accepts, Ali just separated himself from it, and he never made any secret of the fact that it was because of his faith in Christ, in Jesus. So this book, that's 66 books and letters, is all about Jesus Christ. It's all about who and what we believe to be our Lord and Saviour. And he took me to church, and I started this lengthy journey of these proverbial scales. And I said before, and I have to qualify this, I once said on the road to Damascus, what that means is there's a passage in the Bible where a biblical character called Paul has a revelation from Christ himself, and he starts to see the truth that I'm talking about. the scales fall off his eyes and he's filled with the Spirit of Christ, and he sees the truth for what it is. And mate, that changed my heart and mind as to what I got out of bed for every day. So if you start being an individual that searches for success, the next win, the next bit of gold, the next bit of money, the next bit of fame, and all that rest of it, what fills the ego, that's what's amazing. That everybody talks about the ego, don't they? The ego there for all these sort of, it's all encapsulated in one bigger objective reality, but at the centre of that reality is the truth. So when I started reading Bible and I started to understand it theologically, it was the only place in existence, in consciousness, that talked about eternal life, and it just made absolute sense of what I was looking for. So if that shroud, that veil had been of darkness, not understanding what the truth was, that was lifted, and by God's grace, that fills me with direction. So going back to what I was talking about, the entropy of getting old and not being able to do a 300-metre row anymore, or not being able to look as good. Well, in relation to eternity, it becomes almost irrelevant. And the fact that mortality has never been more prevalent isn't a conscious worry, because I know that we're spirit beings, and again, by God's grace, one day I will die. And there's a biblical verse here, I've just put it up there. Truly, truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. There's an element of that through our actions. What we do and say in life is like a vapor trail. A good mate of mine called Clive got used to talk about aeroplanes going up the top. We can see vapor trail that will leave behind. People on the plane and the pilot can't see it. But one day, when he walked out of his work, a bit fed up and had a long day, he looked up and thought, do you know what? I wish I was going on that plane to a different destination to where I am now. And it motivated him to make a few different decisions in his life, to lose weight and to change his life. That was the vapor trail. Now everything that we say and do in our lives has an influence on the people that hear it or see it. And by God's grace, again, my influence, motivation came through Scripture and through all the Spirit, and that's been the way it's been ever since.
You spoke earlier about having this coping mechanism. How do you use that as a coping mechanism?
Well, that depends on the context. So, one, how long do we live? If we're looking, 80 years old, and I see things. Some people are living a lot longer now. But in the scale of how long science says, universe has been around 14 billion years, for the universe, it's just a boom, it's a thunderbolt. It's not even a thunderbolt. You know what I mean? It's no time at all. So there's an anticipation of being at one atonement with my Creator. And again, rather than being concerned with filling that ego up, and listen, I still have challenges without a doubt. I still get things wrong on a daily basis. You can probably tell from what I said earlier, there's still a lot for me to deal with. I'm not in a bad place by any means. I'm in a great place. I'm out of my comfort zone. It's a place that I've always said is the best place to be. But I know that symbolically, my wife and children are the most important material things on the planet for me to deal with. It's where I get the biggest source of earthly love from, and it's unconditional. I did a gratitude video for RL Cares recently. The one come out about Sean Loughlin, one about James Simpson, and a few others. And my video is all about my wife and kids. And the Bible starts and ends with a marriage, being as one manifest. We all become one flesh. You see your kids, Woody. You see little bits of yourself, don't you? Bits of you. It's literally you and your wife together genetically. And it's unbelievable. There's a real sense of blessing and gratitude in that for me. So my daily life is about getting out of bed and doing the best, being the best version of me for them, knowing that I need to be as prepared as I can be. Because if something comes up, like you said, the abyss, you described it as the abyss, could come at any time. And I've got to be prepared. And I believe that if I'm created by God, right, it makes complete sense that the Bible has got the answer to every question that I could ever have, or every issue. And the whole idea that Christians pray and lift up the problems to God is rooted in that fact. And there's no that he can't deal with. There's an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient being. There's no that he can't deal with. So all those fears and anxieties lift up to the Almighty. And by God's grace, again, it never gives us anything that's too hard for us to deal with. And, mate, a big portion of that is going through some horrible moments in life. My favourite book of the Bible is a book called Job. It's the oldest book in the Bible. And it's about a guy who's doing everything right. And just really quickly, I'm not going to turn it into a sermon, though it is a Sunday. He's doing everything right, and he's really wealthy. Not that that's important. He's really successful. Not that that's important. And he's got a lot of things, but he's righteous in God's eyes. But God goes to Satan and says, have you seen my servant Job? It's called Job. He said, he's outstanding. And I'm paraphrasing here. And the devil says to him, yeah, but he's only like that because you've given him everything. If you take it all away, he'll curse you to his face. So God says, go on then. Go take it all away. Bearing in mind that God's still sovereign. You know, there's this cultural idea that come from medieval days, from Renaissance period, when a lot of painters, such as Botticelli, was painting the Divine Comedy, Dante's Divine Comedy. And what they did was, you've got to remember back in the day, that not many people could read, probably up until a couple of hundred years ago. And all Bibles were probably in Latin in a church in Italy. So you only got to hear what was being said by the person who can read Latin at the front of the church. And the church attendances went up 2 or 3 times when these painters started painting these pictures of the devil who goes around punishing evil people. Well, why would, and this is dangerous to say this, so I have to contextualize it a bit. Why would an evil person go around punishing evil people if they're doing the same thing? What people don't understand is that Satan, that the devil, is subject. He's subject to same as everybody else. You know, he's not some lord of evilness, though very powerful, a fallen angel, but actually will be thrown into the same place as what evil will be thrown into. And ultimately, God is still sovereign, powerful over. It's not like God versus devil. God is sovereign, the most powerful thing over everything, controls everything. He allows devil, Satan, to go and take everything away from Job to see what happens. And sure enough, his family dies, his wealth is taken away from him, and it gets to a point where the only thing he's got left is himself, a load of sores, because he makes him that poorly that he's on brink of death, and a load of friends that are surrounding him saying, well, Job, you've done something wrong. You must have done something wrong because look at the state of you. That's what God does. He punishes people. And whilst he don't know what's going on, he never loses faith. He keeps his face pointed towards God and trusts in him. And he's reconciled at the end of it, 40 odd chapters at the end of it. It all comes extremely good. You know, and that for us might not be in life, it might be in death. But there's an element of persevering through that. So listen, life might be really difficult. I don't know what's in front of me. I've no idea what will happen tomorrow. I found a squirrel dying outside my shed door yesterday, and I don't know why it was dying. I don't know if it ranting here, but I don't know if it eaten some poison or it fallen out of a tree. It was clearly alive, but eventually it died, and I'm sat there looking at it thinking there's not what I can do to help it. And whatever it's going through right now isn't very pleasant, and it's going to die. You know, my life might be a real blessing. Might be really happy with it. By God's grace, try my hardest for that to be the case. But I never know. But to answer your question, I've got faith that ultimately, at the end of it, through Christ, I'll have an eternal life in what we understand or don't know quite fully as heaven.
Interesting, because there's a lesson in that. That story you just told there could be your last story at the beginning of your Leeds career. You know, God gives you your injury, but you keep your faith. Do you know what I mean? And I'm a very spiritual person today. I sort of fell out of faith, let's just say. I went to a church school, went to church every Sunday. You know, and then growing up, just sort of fell out of all that. And as I've retired and I've got a little bit older, I've got a faith now. I'm not a religious person. I say I'm a spiritual person. So I think the stuff that you're talking about there, there's lessons to be learnt in there in a lot of the religious stories, you know, and people are quite quick to dismiss what is in the Bible, but there's lessons, and I think, you know, one of the things, to use a term by Jordan Peterson, but he uses the phrase, the superordinate principle, you know, that, you know, we live this life and we sort of, you know, we rise up, and then all of a sudden corruption comes, and then it's in chaos. It's organisation, it's corruption, then it's chaos. And there's a certain way that we've got to live our lives if we don't want, you know, this chaos. And, you know, that Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules for Life, and I haven't finished it, I've started it, but it's called, you know, An Antidote to Chaos. Because basically what he's trying to teach us is we need to live this right life, and we need to be truthful. And you've touched on all that as a religious basis. And I think religion has got a place, or spirituality has got a place in society.
Yeah. Oh, mate, well, religion has been at the centre of society since dawn of time, hasn't it? Certainly, listen, it's really interesting what you say about religion. There's a lot of people in church who aren't Christians, they're just part of a club. You know, they make cakes on a weekend and have like village fates, which is fine. It's none of my business. I think faith is a relationship with God. I think there is an objective truth behind that, by the way. So, you know, I'd have a lot of Christians knocking on my door if I wasn't clear about that. I think that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That's how he describes himself. But you're right. And I love the way Jordan Peterson uses archetypes of things that we see and appreciate in life on a daily basis without understanding religion. So you mentioned there the Bible. You know, people don't like what's in the Bible. Some people don't. And I'd ask the question: have you ever read it? Have you ever actually read it? And people, it blows me away. People think Bible's a load of old rubbish. Well, have you actually ever read it? And I've read it twice from cover to cover. So if you read Bible for about 20 minutes a day, it'll take you a year. And I've been through it twice. I read it regularly. When I say I've been through it cover to cover, that's that over there. Then on a Sunday, I study this book again and again and again and again and again. There's some books in there, the Bible and letters, that I've done 7, 8 probably times, and there's 66 different ones in there. But I'd ask the question, you know, not you right now, but have you read it? You can't make a judgment on a book or an opinion on faith based on a book that you've never read. Blows my mind. And I think actually when you do read it, you'll be blown away by how different that culture sees it to be. And listen, the church or churches have played a really, I don't want to use the word bad because it is bad, but they've created a big misconception about what the truth is. I'll give you one example. It's a bit naughty this, but I was at an event and I got told they wanted me to read something significant to this event, but you're not allowed any religion. This event doesn't allow any religion. But this event was about a marriage. And I thought, this is where marriage comes from. What are you talking about? And I read a chapter from the Bible. And afterwards, all like that. What a lovely piece. Oh, lovely that. That's really nice. Because it didn't say God or Jesus or like that, but it's still really relevant. They didn't know. They just didn't know. Anybody who'd read it would know, but they just didn't know. And again, semantics said that one of my gifts, I guess, if I've got any, is that I remember stories, and that's why we started Rugby to showcase personalities in Rugby League. I love storytelling, mate. Stories get us out of bed, educate, entertain, and inspire us. There's lots of stories in there, and only if they read a passage from the Bible, I'll tell you exactly where it's from. I couldn't tell you chapter and verse. There's thousands of them. But mate, C.S. Lewis, let me leave it at this one. Jordan Peterson talks about C.S. Lewis and Aslan. So you've seen Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, haven't you? You've seen Lion, Witch and Wardrobe. Well, Aslan is the main protagonist. He's the hero behind it all. So the kids end up there. The witch is chasing them all around. And C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, was a Christian, massively inspired. So The Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, if you didn't already know, and I'm sure you probably do, is a Christian archetype. So the kids are called the sons of Adam, daughters of Eve, right? And Aslan is a Christ-like figure. And as Christians, we're always trying to be Christ-like. So what does that mean? If a lion, which Aslan is, walked into your room right now, what would you do? I know what I'd do. I'd probably run into that wall and start climbing, trying to get out of the roof. It's a lion, and it's exceptionally dangerous, right? Now, a lot of people talk about Christ as if he's all meek and mild, and he absolutely is meek and mild. Certainly was in his first coming and his life, death, and resurrection on planet Earth. But actually, there will come a time when we're all accountable for what we've done within our lives. And I believe, I think even Muslims believe you're accountable to Jesus. They call him a different name, it's Isa or Isa. Obviously, Jews don't believe that. They still think the Messiah is to come. Now, what's really important is that Jordan Peterson will say that meek and mild means having the ability to be dangerous in the same way that Aslan's a lion, right? And he's very dangerous. It's having the ability to be dangerous, but not to draw your sword. So a bit like a warrior who can chop him with that book of 5 rings. The greatest warrior ever, that is so wise and meek and mild, compassionate and empathic, that this warrior never actually has to draw his sword. A bit like Aslan done, and he looks after kids. And that is, people think that Christianity is some soft, old wave of thinking, but actually the whole world is wrapped up in it, because the English language is all based primarily, certainly contemporarily, on King James Bible, right? And whilst that's changing a little bit, because kids are saying things like "you bought" or "that's sick" or "that's a sick skin" or "stop camping," it all revolves around Fortnite games. Actually, everything that certainly the Western world revolves around is of a Christian archetype. So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying, if you've not read it, then just put 20 minutes of time if you've got it. If anybody's got any time to read anymore, and find out what it is, because if it is an objective truth, is it not worth understanding?
100%, mate. Do you know what? It shows what a society that we live in as well, because everybody's like a sheep. Everybody follows what somebody else is saying. They don't actually go out, and this is the one positive well, there's a lot of positives to go at university, but one of the positives that came out of going to university is critiquing things. Yeah. When you read a bit of research, you don't just read it and believe it just because there's a certain amount of statistics in that research. You've got to critique it and see what they did right, what you think they did wrong, and then look at other examples of work. And that's no different to this, what we're speaking about. But people will just listen to what other people are doing, and they sort of, you get people who sort of believe everything that they see on the news, and then you get people who don't believe anything that they see on TV, and then you've got like people in the middle. And I just don't believe everything that I hear with immediate effect. I've got to critique it, And again, that's going back to a university lecturer that I had, Colin Robertson. He's such a smart guy. I'm going to try and get him on the podcast. But just really taught me to question everything. Just question everything, because what people are telling you is not necessarily the right thing. Go out, research it yourself. So it's spot on that, Jones. I think you bang on, and I've not picked a Bible up for a long time, since I was at school. I've not read it front to front, but it was something that we did quite a lot in the high school that I went to. So yeah, it's something. But what I'll do is I'm going to let you go there, because we've got a ton of material. It's been absolutely brilliant.
I'm just warming up, buddy. I'm just warming up. We'll have to do another one, mate. Just before you go, really quick, just from what you said there, there's as well as researching, there's a perceptive thing. Just really 2 examples that flashed up to mind then, and I feel impressed upon to say. So, number 1, let's say Nativity, Christmas will be here soon. Everybody talks about 3 wise men, or 3 kings, right? The Bible doesn't actually say how many kings come. Now, you know that there's more than one, But all it tells you in there is that these magi or wise men or kings, they brought with them 3 gifts. So there could have been 100 of them, and they brought 3 gifts. There might have been 2 of them, and they brought 3 gifts. But culture thinks, oh, 3 wise men. Of course, that's obvious. And the other thing as well is like Noah's Ark. Like, let's just for a minute consider that might have been a true event. And I believe it is, by the way. And even secularly, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'll say that every sort of ancient culture has a flood story, not just the Bible. So there was a flood happened. I believe it was divine. But when you go to nurseries, you've got like Noah's Ark for a load of animals, right? And it's all fluffy and nice, isn't it? You imagine if the whole point of it was to start again. It's an apocalyptic disaster. Yet the way we perceive it is like a nursery school sort of thing to put on a wall. Talk about Noah's Ark being in a flood. And it's just really interesting how human beings have a mindset and think, actually, when you ask that question, 15% of a crowd, apparently you only need 15% of people to do something, everybody will start following. And it is really important. I think what you said there is massive. You've got to critique and ask some questions, because I'll say this, the truth is not fragile, mate. So you're absolutely bang on, and I appreciate this chat. You've charged me up, mate. I feel ready for it, and I needed it at the end of this week for sure.
Yeah, no, honestly, mate, I genuinely think you're one of the, not just in rugby league, I think you're one of the most interesting characters, that I certainly know. And it's interesting listening to you. Like you say, we could go on for hours, and we'll definitely do a part 2. Because there's so much more we can talk about, your acting, your journalism, what you're up to now and your coaching. We've not even spoke about any rugby league as such, apart from the start of your career, which is great for me because, again, it's not a rugby league podcast. It's a podcast to listen to you as a person and you as an individual and to get that out to you. And I think you've come across really well. And, I think there's some really truth and big lessons to be had in there.
Super. Pleasure, mate. I look forward to the next one. I'll talk to you about my acting. These 2 posters here behind me, they're my acting debuts. This one and that one. That's
it. The Leeds lads. That's something we'll definitely touch on the next one, mate, and we'll get you on.
Happy days, mate. No, happy days. No, that's cool. Good on you.
Brilliant. Cheers, Jonesy. Appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate. God bless you, mate.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.